why do people need a coach? If I'm somebody out there looking to develop, why would I need a coach? Why would I, with all the other things I've got to spend my money on, if it's me individually, why would I invest in spending time with a coach? Or to put it another way, if I'm a leader in a business, why would I spend some of my learning and development budget on a coach? What benefits will it bring? Ali, what's your thoughts?
If I wanted to go in with a wow, I could say it's potential to be life-changing, because I think it can. For me, it's that bit about being a totally independent space, allowing for you to unlock the answers. It's purely focused on you. It's about you. It's not anybody else's agenda. It's not, as I say, it's not the coach's agenda. I say it's not my agenda. It's all about their agenda. So for me, it's about bringing whatever it is that you are bringing, and helping move that forward to make things better, to change something in a positive way. And as I say, if I was going to be markety, you couldn't put a price on that. When I think personally of some of the different impact on that, for me, it's about really that time for you and being able to further yourself in whatever that way there is. I mean, there's loads of research out there about the benefits of coaching, whether that's to organizations, whether that's to personal things. But for me, it's that biggest thing about that shift. Again, like I said in the last one, about whether it's something that you do differently, or whether it's a different way of being or doing something, it can make some real positive, not always life-changing. That's going obviously big, but for some people it is. So the possibilities, I think, are endless, and it's sometimes just taking that leap. But for me, it's a good investment, and it's a valuable investment, because then it's investment purely about you.
Louise, what would you add to that?
Something struck me when Ali was talking earlier on. I think it's that from an investment point of view, or from an organisation, or why would I invest in a person? I think you're investing literally in a person. So it's not, although it's a short, sharp intervention, we don't have to be overly prescriptive about achieving a tick box in A, B, or C. But we can be, as an organisation, we can put some kind of, potential outputs to be realised or conclusions to come to. But I think because we're dealing with a human, the ripple effect is that you will always get D, E, and F as well. So as well as you getting your A, B, C kind of thing, and your what's in scope, what you think is in scope initially with a course of coaching, I think it goes deeper, it goes longer term, it's much bigger than that. So I think that's the return on investment. It's not just this first 6 months or even a year. Potentially, if you're working with the right kind of people at the right stage in their career, you're getting 20 years worth of massive payback in that sense, because they operate differently, they role model differently, they lead teams differently. Again, it's just that ripple effect for me, I think, is unknown. And I get that's difficult to quantify, but let's not forget about it, because that human potential is huge.
Lou, what would you add to that?
For me, whether it's from an organisational level or a personal level, for me, it's about solving a problem. So you're hiring a coach at a point in your life when there's something you want to work on, you want to fix it, there's a goal there. So for me, it's about, all business is about solving a problem, all business. And I think coaching is, for me, people are seeking out a coach at a point in their life, often when they're looking to solve a problem. So yeah, for me, that's why. I've hired lots of coaches in my time, and mentors as well, and it's a point when I'm at a crossroads, it's a point when I'm at a transition, it's a point when I don't know what I don't know and I need some help. And that's when I'm like, I've got to hand my money over, I need some help. So and the same, with my coaches, they've come when there's a problem that they can't solve for themselves. So for me, that's quite a succinct way of putting it, but that's my take on it.
And this was something I wanted to ask all of your opinions on, actually, about this idea of needing to seek out somebody else when there's a problem to solve, or there's a transition, or whatever it might be. Because for me, the benefits, if when thinking about the answer to this question, it's about creating time to think. And I genuinely think, and this is a sweeping generalization, so I have to be careful, but like it's hard work to think. and I don't think people like to be made to think. Do you know what I mean? I think sometimes I just, and I'll be guilty of it as well, just to have a day where I just coast through on autopilot and do things. It's kind of hard work. So the benefit is I get some thinking time, because I know I'm not the greatest at creating my own thinking time. So I do need something with a bit more rigor and somebody else to hold me to account for it. But the question I'd like to ask you is it impossible to coach yourself? Because I guess I'm talking about needing somebody else to be that catalyst and that stimulus. And I've thought a lot about this, and I find it really difficult to be my own coach. I think I find it easier with somebody else, and there is another benefit, and that's the reason why people pay for it and invest in it, because it needs somebody who's objective to the conversation. I don't know what you think. Can you coach yourself, or do you need somebody else?
Accountability. That for me, that's the big thing. So in principle, we know how to self-coach. We know the models to follow, perhaps even some exercises, some structure that we might want to put in play, all of that kind of stuff. But actually, at the end of the day, it's that accountability, isn't it? So I think that for me, that's why a coach would pay another coach for support for that accountability, I think.
And asking the questions that you won't or can't ask yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can coach yourself. I do. I've got a journal. I'm always self-coaching and reflecting and all of that. But your biggest transformation is going to come when you've got that impartial person that's asking the questions that you can't or won't ask.
Definitely. That was exactly my thoughts. It's around, you can, you know the stuff to say to yourself, and okay, think about this in a different way, and look at it from their point of view or whatever. But it's the questions that you avoid asking yourself or hadn't even thought of. And I think it's looking from a coach. You look at it from a different lens, potentially without a filter, whereas sitting in the coach's chair, this is my view, and I've got my experiences and all of that I'm bringing with me. But from a coach point of view, it's through a different lens. So they will ask you the things, and it should challenge you, and it should, when you ask that question, it made me think, I've not really thought about that before. And it's kind of those questions that you think, I've not thought of that. And that's where a coach can make a difference, and they'll ask you something that you maybe not even thought of, or something that you might have had there but thought, no, I don't want to ask myself that question because I don't know that I'm going to like the answer, or it's going to make me think about things that I might not want to try or I might not want to do, but that actually might be the solution. So that's where you provide, as a coach, for me, that completely different, non-judgmental, non-filtered perspective.
Yeah. And even when we're talking about it like this, again, going back to something we touched on in the last episode, that you arrive with a coachee, a client, it's pretty much as strangers, don't you? In the majority of cases. It's not always the case, but in the majority of cases. And when you think about it, it shouldn't work really. This need to be like challenged and open and share things. The amount of times you hear clients or coaches say things like, I've never shared that with anyone before, or I've never really gone there with anyone before, yet you've barely got a relationship. So it almost shouldn't work in a way that you've got somebody who's a complete stranger, yet you can open up to them. And on the other hand, you've got people who are really close to you at work, outside of work, that you don't. Maybe it's because those relationship comes with baggage and other things that get in the way. I don't know, but yeah, it's an interesting one of just having somebody who gives you that, like you said, Ali, that different perspective, that different challenge. And we'll come on to some of the things that people present in coaching in the theme shortly. But I guess the other thing I thought about, and I'd great to get your thoughts on, as someone, my experience of coming to coaching was having experienced coaching. That was the thing that made me realize the real impact of it. I was coached, and feeling the impact of, again, being heard, being positively challenged. Lou, you've talked about having a cheerleader, somebody who backs you in that conversation, believes in you, and didn't have an agenda all that thing wrapped up, all of those things wrapped up into one was the thing that made me think, crikey, this thing is quite powerful actually, because I'm on the receiving end of it. So I don't know, what's your experience of being coached as well?
Well, every coach needs a coach. That's what
Indeed.
I would say. And I think a lot of people would agree that having experienced coaching sort of propels them to potentially explore coaching for themselves or training. So, yeah, I've had coaches periodically throughout my career, and interestingly, those are the real sort of highlights, or the points in my career where I really excelled. And I can pinpoint, when they were, because I was having coaching and sometimes mentoring. So yeah, I can't remember the question, Stephen. Did I answer it?
You did, yeah. It's just that experience of being coached, does that give you a different perspective? And no, I think you've answered it brilliantly. Louise, what about you in terms of being on the receiving end of it?
Yeah, so obviously, yes, of course, and we coach each other, and as coaches working together, we like to try and coach each other, and we have co-coaching kind of conversations and all that kind of stuff. But actually, it's just occurred to me that I don't think I came to coaching from being coached. So I don't think I was coached prior to coming to coaching. So that's kind of made me think, well, where did I suddenly pluck this idea from that I was going to train to be a coach? So that's interesting. I'll take that away. But I think it probably stemmed from having very low level coaching conversations with really coach like managers, one in particular, I think, in my career. And I think that's what turned me on to having different kind of conversations. So I think that's maybe where it stemmed from. I'll have to give that some more thought to that. But then as a trained coach, obviously, we get supervision and we kind of peer coach together. And I quite like that. So I've entered into arrangements where they call it kind of greenhouses. And I'm sure this is what Lou's probably run. She's run little small cohorts of people that come together, maybe on a Friday morning, once a month or whatever, quite informal. But actually what you're doing is a bit like an ALS, but slightly more coaching style. You're coaching each other and kind of facilitating those really useful conversations. So they have to be part of everyday interactions on a regular basis. I think for me and it's that, again, that accountability. I'm awful at resisting accountability if I can. And I am very, very, very guilty as an aware coach that I stay superficial in a lot of my conversations with even colleagues. So that's something I need to work on. That's a development. And I think having these kind of forums, having the opportunity to co-coach and be honest and open with each other is really, really useful for my development and ongoing practice.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting that accountability and that challenge that's provided. Because again, I'm sort of generalising about most people don't like to think. I'm sure there are lots of people out there who do love to reflect and think and all that sort of stuff. But again, being, without it sounding trite, being in the comfort zone is quite a powerful thing, isn't it? As well, it drags people into just staying where they are. So you're almost, in a sense of trying to coach yourself, you might be battling against your own your own sort of desire to stay safe and stay comfortable, whereas the other person doesn't have that, and they can really, coaching can be all the things we've said, really positive and really empowering and inspiring and motivating, but it can be challenging as well. That's my experience of being coached. Really challenging in a positive way, but really challenging. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I guess it does bring us back to the question again, though, because Ali, you did have some information that you found about, research that's gone into what are the benefits of coaching, for the money that is spent on it, to bring it back to the commercial side of the industry. People may ask the question if they're not bought in and engaged with the process, the engagement of coaching. So what is it you found that might be useful to share?
So Fortune magazine estimates that the average return on investment is more than 6 times the cost of the coaching itself. So that's, as I say, from a money point of view, because a lot of organisations will be about, what money benefit will I get from that? But it's also other areas. So the ICF also did a study around, so the International Coaching Federation, what coaching clients saw as the most beneficial. And the top 5 responses were greater self-awareness, a more balanced lifestyle, smarter goal setting, less stress, and more confidence. So
I would take that, would you? If someone could offer me that, I would have that.
Yeah.
Where can I get that? Someone tell me.
I guess I wonder if it's the positioning that about the benefits of coaching, because it can seem quite expensive to some people, especially if they're paying for it personally. And Lou, you've got loads of experience, haven't you, of people literally parting with hard-earned cash to get your benefits. And I wonder if it's developing that context and that narrative, which I think we're getting better at, about how we develop ourselves and how we invest in ourselves. So obviously now, as mental health is getting a much wider agenda, and as it should, it's that acknowledgement that actually these little things that we can do here, and we can self-serve and we can support ourselves, and that invest in ourselves and develop ourselves, they do pay dividends for all parts of our lives and continue to pay dividends. So it's not like a haircut, 50 quid, 60 quid, whatever, for a woman to have a haircut. But it kind of is the same money. And yet people will pay for a haircut that lasts 6 weeks and yet wouldn't pay for coaching that lasts 6 years or 16 years. So I guess it's around kind of changing that little bit of understanding or perspective or narrative around that investment and that payoff. That was a bit random. Sorry.
No, but I know it's brilliant, because in business, you've got wants and needs. Your hair is, I've got to have my roots done, and then you've got coaching, which kind of can fall into this. It's a want. I don't need it.
Nice to have.
Yeah, so it's shifting that perspective, I think, and it's happening. We're still a new industry, and it's starting to change. So, when I trained 14 years ago, corporate coaching, executive coaching, like we said before, was very much for the top tiers, the sort of C-suite, and it's changed so much in the time that I've been a coach, and it's really starting to filter down. People are starting to gain an understanding of it. So, yeah, I think it's a really interesting area that you've just spoken about.
And if I look at those top 5, if you said to me I could give you a more balanced lifestyle, less stress, more confidence, you'll be more self-aware, and you'll be able to set better goals. And I kind of think I've got all that myself from coaching. And if you offered it like that,
Sign me up.
please. Yes,
But
please.
is there a pill? Can I have a pill?
Yeah.
Because I'd like it now. So that, I think also that's a dilemma, isn't it? Actually, because there's effort required. So you're coming to coaching not for a quick fix. And even though people will say, yeah, oh, absolutely, well, I'm going to work. I'm prepared to put the effort in. So I think there's still a little bit of kind of understanding and getting that really nailed down. Because actually that top 5 list, brilliant. I'd love to take that in a pill, and I'll do that for 6 days, and all of a sudden I'll be transformed. And of course it's not quite like that, is it? So you're asking someone to pay money, commit time, effort, energy, and potentially pain. 5 things there that are going to be potential barriers to me. Where do I sign? It's not immediate, is it? So they're the 5 kind of things. I just made those up. Yeah. There's probably more, but do you know what I mean? That's what we're kind of dealing with in the conversations that we're having, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the pain has to be quite acute, I think, to tip somebody over. I think that's what when going back to it's solving a problem, and the pain has to be quite acute, really, for someone to go, okay, I'm going to pay to have somebody help me solve this. And when the pain is great enough, that's when we'll put up and we'll make the change, and we'll embed new habits, and you do all those things that you've just mentioned. So
But as a coach, getting someone, a coachee, at that moment, sign here, please. Really hard. I mean, that is like knitting fog. That's so that's where these programs are developed, and that's kind of, we need some kind of framework, we need an ROI, we need some kind of outputs and whatever, because it can be a little bit intangible, and it can be difficult to pin those people down at that right time.
And I think that's as somebody who for a living used to work in the L&D part of a large bank, return on investment is one of those, and I'm sure we'll address this in a future episode in more depth, but it's a really difficult thing to get around development. And even with coaching, as we've established, we're operating in this behavioral area more than hard and fast skill development or knowledge. It's really quantifiable skills and knowledge. You can see it, you can get your hands around it, it's tangible. So it is difficult to get a solid return on investment when it's things that it's how people operate, not what they do, and it's by its nature intangible. But as has been alluded to, it's a young industry. It's maturing all the time. There's more research around it. So it's nice to see things from the likes of the ICF and stuff that does, in an empirical way, say these are the benefits, and 6 times your investment on the cost is pretty astounding, really. And we've touched on this around the sort of things that people are coached on. So I think let's move it on, if we may, around. Okay, we've spoke around the benefits, the financial impact of it, and the sort of the benefits that people would have, and why people would seek out a coach in the first place. What are the sorts of things that in your practice then do people present as the problems to be solved, Lou, as you mentioned before? And I'll come to you first, if that's all right. What are these problems that need to be solved that you engage with?
Well, it's interesting as a coach, because in the early days when I was trained, you can coach around anything. It's about the questioning, isn't it? And it's true, you can. But for me, what happened as I took on my private practice clients, I found my niche. I found what I enjoyed. And for me, so I was presented with all sorts of different, topics that people would come to me. But for me, I sort of found myself in this sort of career transition, career development space, sort of almost this purpose piece. So I had a lot of people come to me around wanting to leave their job, wanting to do something more meaningful. So we did a lot of deep work around values and talents and drivers and motivators, and some of them stayed within their role but just changed their perception of it, and that was what was needed. For others, they left and they changed direction completely. They retrained, some got different jobs, and in some cases it was businesses or even books that they wrote. So for me, I was very much in that space. So those were some examples of some of the topics that people came to me, and they were quite tangible things in my niche. The book was written and published, the business was launched, they changed jobs, and it isn't always the case, but in my niche, that's what they came to me for. As a coach, that was sort of my area of specialism.
Yeah, fantastic. Louise, what would you offer up in terms of themes of topics that get presented to you in your practice?
So kind of broadly 3 areas, so maybe that kind of career development, career transition. So I did a lot with kind of maybe newly promoted managers, first 100 days kind of in role, how do they change their persona from being a team member to being a manager, a leader, that kind of stuff. So there was a lot definitely around that for a couple of big organizations. And then as my career developed and I started to do associate work, as I grew in experience, and your reputation grows and people recommend you, or they think you might be a fit for certain organizations. I developed a specialism around coaching for neurodiversity, and then also career coaching, which actually aren't too dissimilar as things. And that was really interesting. And there were outputs to that, actually. It kind of gave me a satisfaction in someone that quite likes to see something move and develop and things, because you would see someone go and get a great job and you'd coach them for an interview, or you'd look at their CV and you'd look at strengths, or you might look at their purpose. And actually, they were changing organisation from a big corporate, faceless, nameless place to a charity, perhaps 6 months later or whatever. So there was definite meaning in that, and I could see there was a transition and a difference. So that was nice. And then within neurodiverse adults, it was very kind of workplace strategies. So again, and that's where I used really basic scoring stuff. So kind of, how satisfied are you in work generally, or and how confident do you feel in your time management skills or your prioritizing skills. So there were quite niche things for neurodiversity in the workplace. And then of course at the end of the 5-6 months you do that again, and there were measurable differences, and people then did go on to go and get a promotion because they suddenly felt more confident in their skills and what they had to offer, or they'd positioned themselves slightly differently within the team, or their mindset had changed and said, you know what, I'm as good as everyone else. Okay, my spelling might be a bit dodgy sometimes, but I've got great problem solving skills, and actually there's a role for me in this organisation. So that they were really nice, and so there were a lot of really nice tangible success stories that kind of came out of that, and that felt for me quite meaningful because I felt I was useful, which is always nice. That ticks one of my drivers, so that's good.
You're hired. I'll have you be my coach.
That was in a former life. I've lost all those skills now.
And Ali, what's your sort of key themes that come out when you're coaching?
So coaching within an organisation, it could be quite varied. There was a lot of stuff, people going through change programs. So there was a lot of coaching around change, whether that was for themselves, for their teams, whether that was about for them being able to stay on an even keel, but thinking about, well, what's my future direction? What's kind of, where do I want to go? So there was, I'm going to say, a lot of stuff around that. And I suppose career choices and options and thinking about what they wanted. A fair bit of stuff around wanting to increase confidence, self-esteem. That often, I'm going to say, the one often leads to the other. Things that, and I suppose this is both in the work context, but also then in my private practice, around difficult relationships. So whether it's working relationships, personal relationships, and around wanting to move things forward and exploring that. And then probably the bit, and I suppose this is where my passion is, and it's definitely aligned to what has or is and continues to still be going on in my life, is around that bit about transition and fulfillment and purpose. And I use that in a broader sense around, what am I doing with my life? What do I want from my life? How, so they're quite big questions, and you can obviously filter them down to smaller things. But I think I know for myself, having got to a point in my life when thinking, oh, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? I'm sort of bobbing along nicely, but where am I kind of going? And what do I want from this next stage of my life? I started to, I suppose, from that self-awareness point of view, be more conscious of those questions. And I love it when coaches bring that kind of stuff to sessions, and you're kind of like, oh, brilliant, because it is. And it's sometimes, and I used to think, oh, that's quite self-indulgent. And I have this thing about this word selfish. Oh, it's selfish to think about me and what do I want from life and all of that. But actually, it's going back to, I think, something Lou said. It's about your purpose and giving your life a purpose and having fulfillment from that. So that's an area that I suppose from myself, and I continue to get that. And I think some of the things that have happened and choices that I've made, some of them from having, obviously I've made the choices myself, but I've engaged a coach in some of those conversations, have really benefited me. And I think so when people are bringing that stuff to coaching sessions, I'm like, oh, fantastic. Because those possibilities are endless, and sometimes it's picking up on, but what do you really want to do? Yeah, you're telling me you have to do that or you should do that, but what do you want to do? That's it. Goes back to those needs and wants, and that's the kind of where people start to think of quite random things. I'm like, oh, that's exciting. Obviously not giving my opinion at all. So yeah, I think it can really vary, but yeah, and I think that's the beauty of coaching. What actually somebody brings isn't necessarily what you end up with. So they might bring something about a particular, I want to change my job. And actually it's not about that, it's about something else. And that's the beauty of coaching. It potentially takes you to places that you might not have got to before, and that's where I think it opens up.
And again, those things that sort of inform what you do, or certainly are presented to you on a regular basis, Ali, around starting discussions around purpose and values and why are you doing what you do. These are the sorts of things that I think most people they might have never even thought about the answer to that question. Nobody's ever asked them that before. That's the interesting one with those big questions, is they've never stopped to think about that. It's just been, if it's a career thing, got a job, applied for it, kept my head down, and just followed the path that was in front of me. So for someone to stop and ask why, in a non-judgmental way, why, of course, what's the purpose, is quite powerful. But something else that's just resonated with us in terms of me thinking about the themes that I have is what you said around what's presented isn't always what's really going on. And it's almost like someone going to the GP and there's some symptoms. It's like you start off with the symptoms and that's where the discussion is, and then you drill down to what the root cause is. And I guess my experience of coaching people tends to be very similar to a lot of what you've said. It's sometimes people just feeling a bit stuck. I have that quite a lot, stuck in many different ways, career, just fulfillment, whatever it might be. They might be transitioning from just being somebody who works in a business to suddenly managing people. That's a common thing. I've got to make a better impact with my colleagues, which could be a relationship thing. It could just be the impact that I have on the people around us. And I don't know if this is just a consequence of where we are now in the world, not to be too grand about it, but self-esteem and self-confidence seems to always be something that, not always, but in a lot of cases comes up as a conversation. I don't know if that's how your experience of it. And I'm not sure we ever reach a plateau of self-confidence or self-esteem, and maybe that's why, but maybe it's just a consequence of going through change or in a transition. And those are the things that can chip away at self-esteem, self-confidence. So maybe it's just the fact that, they've had that trigger point where they need a coach. Lou, to your point, they now need to pay for somebody to do it. And maybe it's just a consequence of, I'm doing this big thing, or I need to move from here to here. And that's the point where the nagging voice creeps in that says, you're not going to do this, or you're not capable enough, or it's too risky, or whatever. But yeah, just an overarching thing. And again, it's wrong to generalize for everybody, but self-confidence and self-esteem comes up quite a lot in the conversations I have.
I think it goes back to something Louise said in the first one about that mask that people put on. And sometimes coaching might be around seeing what's behind the mask, or taking off some of the makeup, or whatever, kind of analogies you want to sort of use around it. And that's where, you can say that sometimes it's letting those barriers down or those guards down, in that going back to that safe space.
Indeed.
For me, I link sometimes the self-confidence thing with driving our own destiny, and that sounds terribly grand, but within that, knowing that I have the options. So this is how I kind of would self-coach myself, and this is how I think I personally think it's useful to think of our life, is that we always have options, whatever we're presented with. So we can't control all of this other stuff, but within here we kind of have options. So even if we're presented, it looks like, with a scenario, even within that there's always a little bit of flex, and even in the worst case scenario, the flex is in our head. So a scenario might be presented that feels absolutely nailed down with no flexibility. It is what it is, and it's presented that way. But even within that, we've got the option and the flex to view it differently and to perceive it differently. And for me, I wonder if there's a dotted line between that and confidence, because I think if you feel you've got those options and you can drive and you've got some kind of purpose, or you're self-fulfilling, that helps you understand that you are a confident person, because you're taking decisions based in a confidence space or something. I don't know, I'm not articulating that particularly well, but I'm just wondering whether options is a big theme that runs through a lot of what we work with people, because it's that stuck thing. They came stuck, and actually what we do is we have these conversations to present options. And I think, God, actually, in its most basic form, that's a really lovely way of thinking about it.
Yeah. And, it's we're not getting into different coaching philosophies and stuff quite yet, but there's a reason why most coaches start with grow, and most coaches practice develop beyond that. But a key part of it is options, isn't it? And I think sometimes people feel like they don't have any options. So just a conversation around there are other things you could do. There is another way to approach this. You are more in control than you think, can be a useful conversation to have. So I guess apart from feeling lacking in self-esteem, so it feels very heavy, doesn't it? All of a sudden, people feeling stuck, not making the right impact. Tell me some success stories then. I mean, Lou, you've alluded to a couple already around books being written and stuff. We'll maybe explore that in a bit more detail in a minute. But Louise, what are the successes that you've had with working with clients as a coach? Their successes, obviously, but what have been the successes?
I think some of those things where there is a tangible output in terms of, you work with someone to get a new job and the new job happens and they write to you afterwards, absolutely gushing and, all that kind of stuff. It's brilliant. Great. Ask for a testimonial there and then really quickly. And then so there's some kind of obvious immediate kind of successes, which are lovely. And even some of those kind of pre-coaching scores, post-coaching scores, that's really nice to see as well, that movement and development and just generally, even in a session, how someone starts maybe a bit kind of introverted and a bit low and the voice is very slow or whatever, to maybe a bit more purposeful and lighter, and they give you that feedback visually, verbally. So even in a session, I think you can see an output, you can see a success. But often you'll get those really weird random ones someone will call you up, and say, you coached my brother-in-law 3 years ago and he really recommended you and now I'd like to work with you. And you think, oh, there's a success. How wonderful. So I think there are real immediate things. There are then things that come weeks or months later. And then there are random, lovely little kind of successes and outputs that you might get a couple of years later. And that's always nice, I think.
It's a cruel irony of some coaching relationships, isn't it? That you're never there to see the thing happen, whatever the thing is. And I think that's something we probably haven't touched on actually up to this point, and I'm sure we will more in the future, that, as much work, this is my perspective on it anyway, as much work happens after the coaching as it does in the coaching conversation, because you pull at so many threads in a conversation that again, when I've been being coached, my reflection continues, and I might create the ideas or the solutions when the coach isn't there. So it is a bit of a cruel irony that you're never there to celebrate the light bulb moment or whatever, but it's the reality of it sometimes. Ali, what's your thoughts? What's your successes with your clients?
I remember this was one that actually goes back to when I was doing my training, and we used to do coaching triads each day, and I was coaching somebody else, and it was around their purpose. I hadn't linked the two together actually in my previous bit that I was talking about, but it was kind of what they wanted their business to kind of look like and their purpose. And we came away from that session. There was what we often refer to as the light bulb moment, and we came away from that session and it was really powerful. And they sent me a text that night saying, I feel like today is the first day of the rest of my life.
Wow.
And that's kind of, they're kind of feeling from it. And a year later on the same day, they text me to say, I was still in touch with them anyway, but they text me to say, this is the anniversary of and I'm starting to make positive steps. And I suppose I've been fortunate to be able to see how their, I'm going to say, career has progressed going on from that. I think some other things around working with people who were returning back to work after a sort of career break, whether that was maternity leave, and kind of some of the challenges and the issues around juggling motherhood and career, but also that impact on confidence and being able to support in that way. And then I suppose I also think about my own, what I've got from coaching. One very clear memory, again, this was when I was having my training, was about a difficult work relationship that I'd had, and it was kind of still in my mind. It was still occupying some space in my mind that I didn't like. So I took it to coaching, and I remember a very simple question that was asked about what's the reality of the situation, and my response to that completely changed my frame of mind, that whatever was there completely went. And that was such a powerful thing. And I remember that even now. So when this person's talked about, I kind of like, I just say that phrase that I said to myself then, and it completely goes. And then on the other side of it, I was going through a change program myself at work, and coaching kind of helped me come to some clarity around what I wanted. So I took voluntary redundancy from the place where I'd worked for 27 years. But it helped me to really clarify my decisions, but also do that in a positive way and think about what I wanted from my next steps. And then subsequently on from that, I sailed around the world for 4 months. And that was something probably on the result of coaching that I'd had over the years. But I really did a bit of focus before I went about what did I want to get from that experience. And I say I have my reminder behind me of the map and the different places that I went to. But it was, it was just making me think of using that coaching space to think, what do I want to get out? This is a unique, I say once in a lifetime, I really do want to do it again. It could be a once in a lifetime opportunity. And how, my conversation was, how do I want to get the most out of it? And some of that stuff I was able to put into place. So I learnt ballet for the first time. I never did ballet cricket, but it was about trying new experiences and experiencing new cultures. And so I think for me, I know the benefits that are my success stories from coaching, and I'm still a work in progress. I am not perfect, and I never will be. But I know the benefits it's given to me, and to be able to impart that on other people, whatever little bit is. And sometimes we never know. That person might not have contacted Louise. They might have been told about the success that Louise had with their brother-in-law, but they might not have got in contact. So there's things I think you never know. And that conversation that I had, and that person asked me, what's the reality of the situation? I went back and told them once and said, thank you. But could I, is there an opportunity? Is there an opportunity, however many years down the line, to go back and say, you know what, that really made a positive difference to me and has helped me have a positive mindset about something that at the time was quite challenging. So I could talk forever.
First day of the rest of your life, that needs to go on your business card, Ali. That has to be on there. Lou, I mean, you talked about helping people launch businesses and write books and stuff like that. So it sounds like, and you've said already, some of the successes you've had have been, you've seen the tangible evidence of it.
There's two I want to share with you, just because they're just really fun. One was it was a lady I was working with, and she was a teacher, and her goal was to completely leave her profession. And through us working together, she launched a llama farm.
Nice.
So I've got a picture of me doing a llama trek as her coach, as she when she'd launched, and that's just one, and that was in the really early days of my coaching career. Another one is a lady, again, complete career change, wanted to set a cafe up, and again, when she launched that cafe, I went along, and there's a picture of us. And so there's been so many, and because I've been in the sort of business space, they're really tangible. But just one thing I wanted to share, there's one lady, a private client that I'm working with now, who called me out of the blue 10 years later, right? 10 years, yeah, and very recently as well. And she trained as a new coach, and I was part of that goal. And 10 years later, she's come with another goal that she wants to. So clearly we work well together, because sometimes people go and you're like, where did they go? Did that, like you were saying, Stephen, did that ever work? Did that ever have an impact? Well, clearly it did, because here she is. But I just want to finish with saying, and they're just a few fun examples, but I just want to finish with saying that we talk about success stories. However, the success is purely down to the coachee, not us as the coach. We're the facilitator. We ask the good questions, but it's so important to get that across, that the success purely lies at their door, at their feet. They're the ones that have taken the pain and gone through it, and found the grit and determination to get to where they are. And I just think that's really worth saying, that we are facilitators. We're part of that journey, but it's ultimately down to them.
what a great point to end with. I think we can summarise that it works, doesn't it? I think we're all happy it works.
Ali's life-changing, and I think, you know, and it can be small things, it can be big things, but it is life-changing. It has the potential to really have an impact, short-term or long-term, or both.